Hello, I'm Jenya DeLima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. There are multiple types of thrillers, and we're going to look at the ins and outs of one of those, and that is the metaphysical thriller. Suspense and questions about reality are part of what defines this subgenre, and here to lead the conversation is author and actress Ali Walker. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Ali.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So first, just to get us started, for people who may not be familiar with this, how would you define a metaphysical thriller?
Well, I think, metaphysics, I think means looking at reality and what is your perception of reality? What is the mass perception of reality? How do you define it? What does it mean to different people, obviously? And I think that this book calls into question, the different perspectives have different ways of really translating reality and really experiencing reality. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what it meant to me. I hope.
So what originally drew you to this subgenre and inspired you not just that you showed that you enjoyed it, but to write something in it?
I love sci-fi but I like things like Blade Runner is one of my favorite
Mm,
films, as is the
yeah.
book To Android's Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yes.
For me, it's about, I realize that people seem to be, with the advancement of technology, seem to be getting colder and colder, which is kind of, predicted in Blade Runner. And you see this sort
Mhm.
of dystopian universe where there's replicants and things like that. But I just found that it was very interesting that I find people becoming colder and colder to one another and a lack of empathy in society for the very weakest. And I just decided to sort of explore that
Mhm.
in sort of this thriller kind of like metaphysical, what makes a person powerful, what makes them strong. And my contention is that it's our humanity.
Now I have to know a little bit more about how you integrated that into your book, then if you are okay with giving a specific example that isn't too spoilery.
Well, one of the characters describes, that there is an energy that's pervasive throughout the planet that is the energy of non-life, not death, but non-life, because it doesn't have life. It's joyless, it's wooden, it's cold. And that to me perfectly describes, sort of this whole, we're all tending towards the narcissist, the sociopath, the psychopath, the people who don't have conscience, who don't feel bad about hurting others. And I found that really kind of fascinating, that I could have a character kind of say something about that in a very metaphysical way, that it was energy,
Mm.
because for me, I was a scientist before I was an actress. And
Yeah, I read that.
energy is everything kind of in my head. It's how your energy is and what kind of energy you're around, what you do with your energy. And so I just kind of translated that into the story itself. It's interesting, because I think a lot of physics is now looking at that, it's fascinating. So
Yes. And I was thinking too about what you said about people becoming colder. And I read a study in a psych journal recently, and it was talking about because we're missing even those micro expressions, which we would have known how to interpret or would have steered our conversation in another way. And now, if we're just looking at a screen, we miss those completely. And we might not ever learn that ability to even pick up on those or decipher the meaning behind them.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's how something is conveyed. You can say "I love you," be completely blank, and people don't feel the warmth of your love, But if you say "I love you" with intention and meaning behind it, that your heart is behind it, and that's why AI is kind of scary to me too, because it's able to do everything except capture the human spirit, and that worries me a great deal. I mean, I think for medicine and things of the physical realm, that's great, but it worries me when you talk about telling stories and, basically you're talking about just mimicking and
Yes.
not really having a reason and a passion for telling the story that you're telling or trying, stories create empathy because if you can put
Mhm.
yourself in another shoes in a story, you feel the pain of that character, you feel the longing of that character. And if that starts to go away, I'm not sure what will be.
Yeah, not to get too far off track, but I'm even thinking about that internal voice we use when we're reading to ourselves. If
Hmm.
let's say you've only heard something read in that sort of way, and we've all seen those YouTube videos with the AI voice applied to it, and it does have more of that staccato feel to it. It doesn't
It's
read,
functional.
doesn't
It's not, yeah.
right, exactly. It doesn't have that emotion behind it like you might hear in a song or a human narrator reading it. And so then you
Yeah.
have to think too, how is that then going to just add to that problem? Because if you're able to use your internal voice to fill those words, otherwise don't really have anything with that
There has to be,
emotion.
yeah. There has to be something behind the words. That's what
Right.
acting is all about. What's behind it?
Yeah, but this all leads into something too, and that is where's the overlap then with sci-fi versus a story like this one? And then how do you tell the two apart? Because it does feel like there's a lot that they have in common.
Well, I think they do have a lot in common, and I call it soft sci-fi in this a little
Mhm.
bit, just to explain what is going on. But it doesn't seem too far out of the realm of possibility to me sometimes. That's
Right.
what's weird because you can imagine anything. Einstein always said that the power lay in the imagination, not in the knowledge of things. And I really think it's limitless. So if you can imagine it, it can be. And I'm not saying that we have to like believe that there's, crazy and, whatever, but I really think it's important for human beings not to lose empathy and not to lose compassion because I feel like we are. And we're kind of destroying ourselves, with that. When things are more important than other people, which they are, honestly, it's a very dangerous path, I think, to walk. Greed is it's one of the seven deadly sins for a reason, I guess. You know what I mean? It's scary.
So what are some of the other types of questions that maybe were woven into this or were a part of this as the bigger whole as you were writing? And did you leave them open-ended for the reader to figure out, or did you provide them with an answer?
I tried to tie things up. I tried to come full circle with everything because I find stories satisfying when they do that. I left things open though. I do leave sort of this, not cliffhanger, I won't call it that, but I
Mhm.
leave things open to invite you to the next story because I have three in this series and I have the other one lined up and ready. I'm going to start writing in the fall. Another vantage point of looking at what's going on and making it a more fantastical story, but
Mhm.
something that hopefully people will go, that's weird. That's kind of happening.
Yeah, it feels a little Black Mirror, but in a way, it's almost like, is this really sci-fi, soft sci-fi, a
I think
metaphysical thriller, or is it almost like social criticism, or is it all three?
I think it's all three. I think it's a psychological thriller for the most part. I really do believe that's what it is at its deepest. And
Hmm.
then I feel, it's kind of a little sci-fi there, because the explanations come in that form a little bit, but not in a way that makes you feel like, oh, there was a wormhole and we got into the wormhole and now we're here, which I find fun, but I don't find very satisfying. I tried to keep it a very very simple. It's not simple. It's very complex, actually, I think, but maybe for me anyway. But I find it like if you can make this thing that's here down on Earth, this thriller, and you guys can follow this with me, I'm going to tell you this story about this woman's death. And then the lead, Dr. Ella Kramer, traverses going up and down through her emotions to different thoughts and ideas of
Oh,
why these things are happening. The people who are, quote unquote, crazy in the psychiatric hospital are actually giving us pieces and clues of how reality really works. We just don't know it yet.
yeah,
So
let's talk about that too, the different ways that characters approached reality, and then also how they viewed reality and how you brought that together, or even left the reader wondering who is right and who is wrong, or maybe who is partially right.
right and wrong gets into like you've kind of killed the story when you start going right and wrong. I tried to keep it grounded in reality as much as
Mhm.
possible. And the great thing about having the characters be in a psychiatric hospital, it's like one of the patients explains it to Dr. Kramer at one point because the other person they're talking about is schizophrenic. He hears voices, he's got Tourette's, he's constantly stuttering. And the character explains to her, no, he's simply hearing things that you can't access. And
Mm.
just because that reality is different from yours does not make it crazy. You can't access it. So basically, that's his superpower. You don't have that ability. And, it turns out to be right and things like that. And, I explain, and I'm kind of a weirdo, but I've always thought, it deals with time in a very different way because I've always felt forever that time is not linear. It doesn't go one way.
Right.
Nothing goes one way, right? I've never thought that. So I've always thought it was, two-dimensional or maybe even, three can spiral all over itself. And I put it off as this. I kind of explained it in terms of how I used to feel when I was young, a couple of times that really hit me, that I thought I was like sort of seeing myself. But I was seeing myself at a young age, but from an older person's vantage point. I'd been through some hard situations, and it was my voice, in your
Oh,
head, but it was me at an older age trying to calm myself and trying
oh,
to calm
interesting.
myself. And so I explained that gut feeling is, don't you see it's you on the hologram looking back and reaching out and trying to help yourself at that point in the hologram of time.
I think
So I
that
don't know.
goes back. There are some scientific theories, though, too, that have shown that time isn't linear. And of course, we know time's a social construct, and then different cultures interpret time in a different way or view it in a different way. Or,
Space time. I mean, but it was interesting because I came up with this in 2015, which was nutty. And I didn't really see those articles till about 2017 starting to come out, and I was like, what? So, like I said, if you imagine it, I'm sure they were, but, it was just kind of like, whoa, okay. I just, everybody kept asking me, did you do a lot of research? And, I did some, but not really, I just made stuff up because I think, you know.
yes. Well, speaking of that, too, your setting, it takes place in what many people will be familiar with, or they've at least seen this type of setting before. So, what drew you to this setting? Why did this feel like the perfect setting for this story?
Well, because the different perspectives, which are looked at as abnormal. So it begs the question, really, what is normal? In what reality are you claiming that these are abnormal? Perhaps you're just deficient in that area, as I, said before. So I love that because had my aunt was bipolar, and she had gone through, I think, several electroshock treatments. And then I've dealt with kids in the foster care system in LA who were, like medicated and put into institutionals. And, obviously it's a scary life, but there's definitely some very different perspectives there, because
Mhm.
quote unquote crazy people don't see things the way we see things and don't act the way we would expect. They don't adopt the norms that we expect. And I had an uncle who was deemed mentally retarded at birth, and he was institutionalized as he got older because he was more and more violent. And I didn't meet those two people in my family, but I'd often wondered what they'd endured and what they'd lived through. So I'm kind of paying homage to them. These people have superpowers.
Yeah. I'd read that you were heavily involved in the foster community, or that you've, I think, what was it, had a film about it?
I did a documentary that came out in 2005 and was, it was a very tough look at the LA County foster care system. So that was a really bleak look at what happens. And I never forget this girl. And that's when it really clicked in me. And I started thinking this way because I didn't understand how we as a society could put these little children in such grave danger in so many instances, and what their realities must be like, and that they had no control over those realities. But one girl said it best, and it's in the film. The film is called For Norman, Wherever You Are. And I put it on YouTube because I wanted everybody to watch it. I just want anybody to see this. But this girl says, and I quote, I would have rather have stayed with my mom, who was doing the things that she did, than go be with people who weren't real people. And that always stuck with me, because it meant they had no bar and
Oh,
they didn't care at all. And some of the things she, described with me ranged from absolutely horrific to just basic, kind of just cruelty
mhm,
and just not caring. And, children, that's all,
right.
that's what they need, because she knew her mother loved her, even though she was not doing okay and a drug addict. But the other people, they just didn't care.
Hmm. No, I can definitely see how that would influence this story, because it seems like here's a lack of empathy here, or visions of reality that might not match what other people would describe reality as. And then you see it in this story as well, just in a very
Mm-hmm.
different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, going back to the genre, so how do you balance the suspense with those non-physical pieces of the world or our inner thoughts?
Well, I just lay down little clues everywhere. And that's what people, when they read it, they come back to like going, oh my God, they were all there, these little pieces all over the place. And we just didn't know it. So I just lay them out because you'll think nothing of them, I think, in a lot of ways, but they're very important.
Is this something that you accomplished in an early draft, or did it happen during revisions and editing?
No, I had it all there. I had many more pages. My editor, John Perugine, who's an author, was phenomenal because he's a very bright guy, and he went through and said, you are repeating yourself because you're thinking that we're not following. He goes, but your book is different, but we'll follow. Don't worry. Just lose all the repetitive. So I was, over explaining all the time.
Right.
So he had me edit those out, and the book began to flow really well. He was amazing to work with, just amazing. And I had Randy Leidenheim was another woman. She was my last right before I put the book out, who kind of just went through it because she's done a lot of work, and she loved it. And she said, "Don't let anybody change it. Don't let." She did a few little things here and there. She's like, "Don't let them cut it. Don't let them do anything to it." I was like, "Okay," but it was no, it was there. It had these concepts and these ideas because you have to set it up within usually the first two, and so I did. And then I revisited a film that I'd done and I re-edited that. And then in COVID, about 21, 22, I just said, I'm going to write a book. And so I took the screenplays I had and all the ideas I had, and they were all there, and
Mhm.
put them into book form. And that's when I came up with this. Yeah.
What was that like too, adapting what would have been a screenplay or something made for the screen then into a purely written form?
That was wonderful, actually. I mean, I think if you read the book, you know that I write in scenes, not really in
Ah,
chapters. My chapters are very short. They're more like scenes, like a 4-page scene as opposed to a 10-page scene, as opposed to a
mm,
50, So I tend to write very visually because that's what I come from. And people have really noted that about the book. They're like, it's like you can see everything happening. And I love that because that's how I see it. I like watch it in my head and then I just translate it. I think it kind of set me free in a weird way because I overwrote a lot and had to cut back, but I really loved the freedom of describing every gesture and every intake of breath, and kind of got a little too enamored with it, I suppose, because he was like, you don't need to do this. I was like, okay. But it was really fun. I
mhm.
was a voracious reader as a kid. All through my life, that's kind of how I escaped everything. I just read and read and read, as most of us do. And I loved the shot at, being able to try to do that. So it was really, really wonderful for me.
Is there anything you learned from writing this book that you'll change or take into consideration as you're writing book two?
Yeah, I think recapping every chapter is ridiculous. I do take that into consideration. And there were some really good notes. I'd had another woman, Lindsay, and she had told me, stay away from this stuff, like certain things like vaccine. She was very careful. She said the reader doesn't, and I got that. I tried not to proselytize or be pedantic, just be like preachy. And she said,
Mhm.
just let people decide for themselves because I had a couple of more harsher thoughts from a couple of the characters. And I was like, you don't need that. You don't need that. I don't want to make people the villain. I want
Ah,
them
okay.
people, and people are capable of bad things,
Mm.
whether intentionally or not. So it was really good to learn that, and I guess I knew it from acting that the character is who he
Oh,
is
yeah.
because of the way he behaves.
Right. So,
And
what did you learn from acting that you were able to bring into the characterization here? And we can even talk about your three major characters who are named in the summary.
yeah, I mean, I became them, and I kind of channeled them when I thought about being them, and I just thought, some people have noted that there's different points of view because there are different characters in the story, and I was like, yeah, but I like that. I like being different characters. I like looking at that bowl from this vantage point, from that vantage point, from that vantage. It makes it interesting,
Yeah.
makes it fun for me because I go in and I think, well, what would I think now? And that's how I kind of approached it. Like, well, what am I thinking? Why would I do that? It just kind of made sense to me. I don't really even know if I'm aware because I've been trained for so long to just wonder what my thought process or why I think that or what I would do. Because, as an actor, that's all we do. The circumstances are set up and you're like, well, how did I do that? And why would I do that? And and you just kind of I think, naturally do that. You know,
Yeah.
you can play different people. And so that was really fun for me.
But POV is one of those things that so many authors have a hard time wrapping their head around. And so to already have that instinct, really, at this point, it's become an instinct, and being able to just channel that into your writing,
It was
that's
really
a
fun.
huge benefit.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I I don't know. We'll see how. I mean, the response has been pretty positive, and I'm so grateful. Because I never think about, what are they going to think about it? I don't. I'll lose my mind. But it was really fun. It was really fun. I feel really lucky and blessed to have been able to finish it and do it the way I wanted to do it, and it's cool.
So did you write character sheets ahead of time first then, or did you just go into this method of exploring who each person was?
No, I just wrote it. I just stream of conscious wrote it. And I knew who they were when I got in them. And I don't know, I just kind of did it. You know, I was just, I will tell you the strangest thing. And I think this is, I had a teacher, an acting teacher named Harry Mastro George. And I think he influenced me the most because he would tell me to daydream, just sit and
Oh,
daydream about your character that you're going to play in a show or a movie or whatever it is. Just sit and daydream. Remember what that was like, and think about what you did and who you are. And I became very good at daydreaming because I had to. And I'm not a very technical actress in the way. I mean, I am. I know exactly where my light is. I know exactly where that camera is at all times, and I do know how to hit my. I know how to choreograph, but I use my gut, my instincts very much. But I really learned from Harry was how to daydream. And so when I started writing this, I would go to the office, to this little office I had,
mm-hmm.
and I would literally sit on the couch for hours and hours, just daydreaming and daydreaming about this before I wrote a word.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I just daydreamed and wondered and researched a little bit of this and that. It was fascinating. I just kept daydreaming, honestly. I just started writing, and it just was really fun, really easy for me. And, a lot of it was pretty bad, I'm sure, but
Save it
but
for editing, it's fine.
I got editing, thank God. But yeah, I think, and that's one of the things I don't know that kids have anymore is the luxury of daydreaming and being bored and just like laying back and making stuff up in your head, because there's so much going on all the time now with the phones and the this and the that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's that constant influx of stimuli.
yeah, it's distracting, a lot of distraction.
Well, before we end, are you able to give us any hints as to what is going to be happening in book two?
No, no, because I don't say anything if I don't. I think I decided to look at the loss of humanity here on Earth, the loss of empathy, and I'm looking at something else now, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't
Well,
know.
in that case, do you have a parting tip you'd like to share?
My best friend Rick used to always tell me, "Write what you know." So I know this is kind of sci-fi metaphysical, but I pretty much those people and those places and those events were what I knew. So write what you know.
All right,
If you
thank you.
don't know it, make it up.
I like that version of it.
What I did.
See, and it works, so there we go.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for additional information, including all of Allie's links and how you can purchase her book. And if you enjoyed today's show, I'd greatly appreciate it if you shared the episode with a friend. Thanks again!